Welcome to this explainer. If you're an infrastructure or security architect, you already know the IPv6 migration is no walk in the park. Today, we're diving straight into Chapter 8 of the incredibly detailed tutorial, IPv4 and IPv6 Transition Technologies, Architecture, Security, and Firewall Designs, put together by the folks over at Virtualization Options LLC in Colorado. We are zeroing in completely on Chapter 8 today, and it's all about one thing: building a first principles blueprint for secure IPv6 firewalls. We're not doing legacy IPv4 rules here. We're building this from the ground up. So, here's our game plan for today. We'll start with IPv6 firewall first principles, move on to managing Slack and privacy, look at essential ICMPv6 filtering rules, figure out how to secure translation mechanisms, and wrap things up with proactive monitoring and detection. All right, let's jump into Part 1, IPv6 firewall first principles. Look, there is a massive foundational paradigm shift you have to make right now. You absolutely cannot assume that your legacy IPv4 firewall rules are just going to neatly map over to your IPv6 environment. It doesn't work like that. In the IPv4 days, you might spend weeks perfectly tuning your IP tables or Windows profiles. But IPv6, it demands a totally independent auditing mindset. We are talking strictly separate IP6 tables on Linux and completely distinct Windows firewall IPv6 profiles. Chapter 8 of the tutorial actually highlights a massive recurrent vulnerability here. Teams will write these beautiful, robust rules for IP4 and then completely forget to populate this separate IPv6 rule set. You're basically leaving the IPv6 front door wide open while the IPv4 side is bolted shut. You have to treat IPv6 as an entirely independent security perimeter right from the get-go. Moving right along to Section 2, Managing SLAC and Privacy. Let's talk about the endpoint layer, where address multiplicity really throws a wrench in your defensive posture. Unlike IPv4, where a host usually has one static, predictable IP, modern IPv6 hosts use a standard called RFC 8981, better known as privacy extensions. Honestly, think of it like a digital burner phone. By default, these hosts generate random interface IDs that rotate periodically, usually every 24 hours or so, to create temporary addresses for outbound connections. Now, if you're a consumer, this is great. It stops third-party tracking dead in its tracks. But from an enterprise security perspective, oh man, it completely flips the board and makes tracking down internal issues incredibly frustrating. Because of these privacy extensions, the downstream impacts are huge. Your outbound session source addresses become highly volatile. When source addresses change every single day, your traditional firewall logging just falls apart. It becomes completely disjointed. Trying to tie malicious outbound activity back to a specific physical host, that turns into a massive forensic headache. And if you're dealing with compliance auditing, you suddenly need extra correlation data just to prove who did what. It's an administrative nightmare. So what's the fix? Well, in managed enterprise environments where strict forensics and compliance are absolutely non-negotiable, you really need to look at deploying stateful DHCPv6 for address assignment. Doing this lets you override those default privacy extensions so you can actually maintain the deterministic, trackable control you need over your perimeter. Okay, Section 3, Essential ICMPv6 Filtering Rules. At the protocol level, we've got to dismantle this old legacy habit of assuming all ICMP traffic is inherently dangerous. If you blanket block all ICMP in IPv6, your network is literally going to break. Core functionalities like neighbor discovery absolutely rely on it, per RFC 4890. Crucially, you must, and I mean unconditionally, permit type 2 packets. Those are your packet too big messages. If you block these, you create invisible black holes for path MTU discovery. Devices won't be able to communicate their max transmission sizes. Packets will just silently drop. Applications will time out. And your engineering team will be left pulling their hair out trying to figure out why traffic is stalling. On the flip side, you definitely want to hard block deprecated types, like routing header type 0 or RHO. It's an outdated protocol, and it basically rolls out the red carpet for massive amplification attacks. And finally, intentionally drop packets that have excessive or unrecognized extension headers. You want to minimize any attack surfaces your firewalls can't even parse. Next up, Section 4, Securing Translation Mechanisms. Whenever IPv4 and IPv6 have to talk to each other, they use translators, and those boundaries, they are prime targets for attackers. So let's run through a rapid-fire boundary checklist from the tutorial. First, if you're using NAT64 and DNS64 to let IPv6 clients reach legacy IPv4 servers, you have got to validate those traditional A records with DNSSEC before you synthesize the new AAAA records. If DNSC validation fails, treat those synthesized records as totally untrusted. Second, rate limit your NAT64 state creation per source address. If you don't, a simple attacker can cause state table exhaustion and knock your translator offline. For mapping mechanisms like MAPT, strictly validate source addresses and ports at your border relays against assigned rules. What about dual stack light? If you use DS Lite, make sure you authenticate the remote before elements via DHCPv6 to block spoofing. Finally, for basic operational reliability, always deploy redundant NAT64 and AFTR pairs with state synchronization. You don't want a single hardware failure dropping your entire translation boundary. And our final section for today, Section 5, Proactive Monitoring and Detection. A solid architecture isn't just a set-it-and-forget-it deal. You need continuous visibility to proactively spot bypass attempts. Virtualization Options LLC laid out some very specific telemetry triggers in Chapter 8 that should be piped into your SIM right now. For example, Protocol 41 is used for IPv6 encapsulation. If you see a flow between an unapproved source and destination pair, that's not just a quirk, that's an active security incident. Keep an eye out for UDP port 3544 too. That indicates Teredo tunneling. Modern environments completely deprecate Teredo. Even Windows disables it by default nowadays, so if it pops up, trigger an immediate alert. It's a classic firewall bypass attempt. You'll also want to watch for high-rate ICMP v6 Type 134 events. Those are router advertisement floods, and they're a huge red flag for a denial-of-service attack or a rogue router trying to hijack your traffic. And operationally, just keep an eye on your NAT64 state tables. Once they hit about 70% capacity, take that as your cue to preemptively scale up before you start dropping legitimate user traffic. Same goes for unusual extension header configurations, log them, alert on them, and investigate. So we've covered a ton of critical architectural ground from Chapter 8 today, but the big overarching takeaway is undeniable. Doing nothing or just copying and pasting your IPv4 homework is a guaranteed recipe for a breach. I want you to take a hard look at your own environment today. Ask your teams, are our firewall rule sets actually built from first principles for IPv6, or are we just clinging to an outdated IPv4 mindset? This transition isn't something for the future. It is happening right now. Make sure your perimeter controls aren't flying blind. Thanks for hanging out with us for this explainer. Now go double-check those firewalls.